Salutations to the fans of Fire Emblem. You are listening to Untitled and Mekkah.
Hi.
And we will be talking about chapters 15 and 16 of Fire Emblem 11 Hard 5 0% Gross Playthrough. So the previous time that we combined multiple chapters into one video, it was because we warp skipped at least one of those chapters, and this case is no exception, as you can probably glean from the fact that we're deploying very few units. In fact, we are deploying more units than we need, because we are really only deploying Caeda and Pala to grind their experience, and in Pala's case, weapon rank. We need to gain 2 levels for Pala in the span of 2 chapters, and 5 levels for Caeda in the span of 4 chapters, so that they could both promote in time for future strategies. This is a desert map, and in most Fire Emblem games, desert maps are reviled because they restrict the movement of ground units. But here we don't really care because we have a warp staff, the sand does not get in the way of our warp, and we also have a steadily growing air force that we can employ to kind of kill the boss really quickly and negate all the challenges that the terrain poses to us here.
This chapter, even if you weren't warp skipping it, is more merciful than most desert maps because there's a path that almost leads you to the gate that doesn't hurt Marth's movement at all. You do need to kind of hurry up even if you're playing more casually, because there's a final boss actually in the lower right corner of the map. His name is Garnet, and he has a very strong tome that prevents him from being damaged by most weapons, and we don't have anything that can hurt him. So you do need to kind of hurry up, but it's no problem because we just one round KO this Tenere Bishop boss that can't even counter at close range.
The other side objectives that we have to take care of in this chapter, aside from the experience grinding, is we want to kill the thief that Caeda had attacked previously, because he will drop a recover staff, and staves in general are worth a bit more money when sold than most other items. So that's of course one that we definitely do not want to miss because it's within our range to get in the span of 2 turns. So we will be moving on to chapter 16.
Chapter 16 is in some ways more interesting and in some ways less interesting than the previous chapter, but at least it's going to take a little bit longer. Before we can really discuss the chapter in detail, we are going to have to go over another forge, which means another selling spree is coming up. This one is particularly vicious. We have to sell 2 of our ballistas just so we can forge a 3rd one to an acceptable level.
We're going to forge a Thunderbolt, which we're also going to affectionately name the Wolt tackle. It's a combination pun between the special move that Pikachu uses in the Pokemon game, and also between the really shitty archer in Fire Emblem 6. So, kudos to whoever named it. It's a great name. Anyway, we can afford to put a lot of parameters onto the Thunderbolt forge because Thunderbolt is not a very expensive weapon to begin with. It does have very few uses, but we are going to employ it in situations where we need to do a bit more damage in aerospace because Thunderbolt hits resistance and most enemies in this game have very little of that. And we can also put a bit more hit onto it because it's just cheaper to forge extra hit.
So about this chapter, I don't think its design is superb at all, to be honest. The left-hand side is almost completely devoid of enemies. There's some reinforcements that could come up there, and there's some weird enemies that start at the bottom that try to walk to you there, but for the most part there's nothing going on. The main threat that really comes to you are the flyers that start on the middle island where the gate is. They fly towards you, and their AI is particularly interesting because there's some very minor details that change the way that they behave.
Right, so the only enemy within range of one of them is Pala, but that doesn't actually influence the way that the 2 other Draco Knights move. You'd think that it would because Pala is brought down to very low HP, but because none of them can directly attack anybody on turn 1, they fly to who they perceive as the most vulnerable target, and in this case it's actually Harden, which is the reason why we deployed Harden at all. And the reason why they think that Harden is the most vulnerable target is because first of all, he only has 3 luck, and second of all, he has a sword equipped, and he also is doubled in 1-round KO'd by all of the Draco Knights. So, this is one instance in which the goddess icon that we used on Wendell in the previous chapter came in handy, because Wendell would otherwise have 1 luck, and therefore he'd face the highest crit rate, hypothetically, so they would fly up towards him instead of right over to Harden, and that would complicate things because we need George and Boa to be going down from the starting point instead of left.
So Marth needs to be in 2 places in this chapter, and then he needs to seize the gate in the 3rd place. So he has got a lot of traveling to do, which is why he's being followed around by a warp user. He's going to need to visit one of the villages on the left. He can't visit both, just one of them. And then he needs to get to the prison cell, and then he needs to go to the gate, obviously. So we visit the right village, which is the only one in range, and conveniently it gives us the better character between the two, because they give you different characters. And this one gives us Samson, the hero, who is okay. He's got a nice axe rank, he's got nice speed, and that's about all there is to be said about him, right?
Yep. The other candidate is Aaron, who is a paladin. His base stats are similar to Samson's in terms of personal basis, but paladin is overall kind of a worse class, and we really need an axe user actually, so that's why we recruited Samson. Now, speaking of good heroes, or in this case bad heroes, the enemy heroes that are in the prison cell who are guarding Zane are very difficult to deal with. Much like the sniper back in chapter 14, we don't really want to unlock the door prematurely because otherwise they'll swarm us and destroy us because they have huge stats. But with the aid of George and his Parthia, he can snipe them for tons of damage across the door, and then we can finish them off with the help of our ballisticians using either the Forged Thunderbolt or the Forged Aerospate. Now, one thing we have to keep in mind when we're taking on the heroes is that curate that you see on the map, he has the Fortify Staff, and he will heal the heroes if they run below 50% HP. So we have to make sure that we do like a little bit of damage at first, and then a lot of them before they can be healed.
So for the second time this playthrough, Marth angers one of our warp users into warping him to a jail. And that's convenient because that's where he talks to Zane. Zane is a very interesting unit. He can transform into others. And if a map takes more than one turn, then that might turn out to be useful. But in this playthrough, it's not very great.
Right, Zane is a bit more useful in FE12 because most maps in that game, especially on the highest difficulty, take more than one turn because you can't just warp skip them. We kill the boss by using a combination strategy of Minerva and Caeda. That ends up saving a wing spear use for Caeda, and Caeda teleported the warp staff over to Marth, who allowed Boa to withdraw the warp staff so that he can be warped to the gate. And then our final two things to do in this chapter are, for grinding purposes, Katria one-hit KOs the enemy horseman for a ton of experience, and Paola gums the enemy curate for some lance weapon experience. So that's chapter 16 completed in 5 turns, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.